So have you ever wondered what would happen to your aquarium if you just kind of let it do its own thing and not really worry about it for about 4 months? Well, in today's video, I'm going to showcase what exactly happens because honestly, I've neglected some aquariums. What's going on, guys? Justin from H2O Plants here. And yes, I've neglected some aquariums. I'm recording this in March, but I've set up a bunch of aquariums in this room, actually on the other side of the room over here. You've seen videos of all of them, plus some in the basement. And the majority of them have been neglected. The reason being is the holidays came up. Pretty much ever since like October and onwards, my life has been just crazy with the holidays and vacation that we had and just a bunch of stuff. So I haven't had a whole lot of time to really work on these aquariums. Now, in today's video, we're actually going to be taking a look at the 75-gallon aquarium that I set up about maybe 4.5 months ago, going on 5 months. That was uploaded to the channel. It was like $1,000 in plants because it was a bunch of rare plants, and we're going to be taking a look at that today. And with this video, I kind of wanted to touch on a couple different things having to do with this specific tank, but I do have probably about another, as I look around the room here, about another 4 aquariums that I need to give you guys updates on, which I will be doing in the future. I do actually have to get to them and do some maintenance on them, spruce them up, and showcase the before and after like I'm going to do in this video. So let's talk about the 75-gallon. Well, the 75-gallon was set up with all these expensive plants, a bunch of rare stem plants, some rare nubis, boosts, all this stuff. And we just kind of let it do its own thing over the course of the last 4.5 months or so. We've done very few water changes on it. I would say maybe once every 3 to 4 weeks. Not a lot of water changes and really not more than about 50% when we do them. Usually we're just topping off. We don't usually do large water changes with this aquarium. Now, I wouldn't suggest that to everybody. Obviously, you want to do your water changes, especially if you have like prized fish or sensitive fish. The fish in this aquarium are Celeste Danios, and there are 50 of them in a 75-gallon with a ton of plants. So they are not generating enough waste to constitute a kind of full water change or half water change or anything like that. I don't need to do maintenance on the aquarium because it's such a light stock load and a large amount of plants. Now, I will say many of the plants have overgrown the aquarium. They've kind of just taken over and they have not been trimmed. Honestly, I haven't done any trimming in this aquarium since we set it up. I just kind of let it grow out, do its thing, so that way I could see what plants are going to grow, what plants aren't going to do well in the aquarium, and what I think I need to adjust accordingly. So the first task was trimming the plants because they were overgrown. I needed to see what was going on, so I needed to remove all the overgrowth, take it out, sort it kind of by kind of plant or bunches of plants, and replant after that. So what I did is I shut off the filter, number one. That's kind of a tip that I want to give everybody here, is that when you're doing maintenance on your aquarium, such as trimming plants or rearranging stuff, turn off your filter. If you're going to be in there for, a half hour, it's not going to matter. It's not going to make a big deal. You just don't want the filter blowing all the trimmings or whatever you're going to be moving around all over the aquarium, because it's going to get very cloudy. The plants are going to get tossed all over the place. It's just going to be a lot easier to manage. So definitely turn off your filter before you start trimming or anything like that. Now, what did I do? So I started working on one half of the tank. I wanted to trim all the plants down to about halfway down the aquarium because that is where I wanted to start with the line of sight having to do with the back row of stem plant. Now, you can see there's a bunch of them just growing all up and out of the aquarium. Like there's just a ton of them that are kind of just halfway across the aquarium from where they start at, and they just grow really fast. And the reason why they're spreading out so much is because most of the plants in here are rotellas, and rotellas are just known for their fast growth. They are one of the fastest growing species of aquarium plants. They pretty much take over once you put them in there, so keeping them at bay requires lots of trimming. Now, it's kind of like a catch-22. Most people don't have a problem with fast-growing plants. Me, on the other hand, because I have so many aquariums, it's hard to keep up with the maintenance on them, and I opt to try and use slower-growing plants. In this case, I probably use 2 fast-growing plants, but that's okay. Now, what I wanted to do is, before I replanted any of the plants in the aquarium back in, I wanted to actually do a full trim, remove all of the excess that I trimmed away. And I was trying to keep the trim pieces as long as I could without, breaking them up. Because when I go back to replant, I want to be able to divvy them up a bit, maybe cut them half the size that they are, and make 2 new stems out of them and replant as such. So that's why I was trying to kind of pick out everything as I was trimming it, going very slowly, and making sure that I'm not mixing things up too much. Now, something that I wanted to kind of mention when trimming these plants, like I said, I'm cutting them down to about halfway down the aquarium. The reason being is when you trim stem plants, one stem will turn into two because they'll kind of separate at the top when you first trim them. So it's ideal that you trim them a little bit below where you want that branch to start happening, because that's where it's going to start getting bushy. Because to maintain that kind of height to the background of the aquarium, you're going to come in and trim several times around that height. So what's going to happen is those stems that turn into 2 are then going to turn into 4 and 8 and so on. And they're just going to keep branching and branching out till you have a large bush. Almost think of like a hedge outside, like like a green hedge. You'll just have so many branches kind of going around, and you could shape and sculpt it how you want. And that's kind of what I want to do with this aquarium, is I want to be able to shape the stems accordingly, how I want them to look. My idea basically for the aquarium is once all the stems reach the height of 3/4 up the tank, that's where I want them to be the bushiest at. So I'm going to trim them at about halfway up the tank, so that way they still have a little bit more to grow and get bushier as I continue to trim them over the next, say, year or so. And that's what a lot of people don't get, is they trim it at the height that they want the plant to be, but then all the bushiness is going to be up above where they originally wanted it to be. So you always want to trim lower than where you really want the plants to wind up. Now, something that I've kind of been thinking about, there's 2 ways to really plant stem plants, or really plants in general. You kind of do either in sections where you have one specific group of plants, then you have another specific group of plants, and then you have another one maybe. And there's another way to do it where they're all kind of mixed in together. In my opinion, the mixed in, where they're all kind of tangled within each other and there's different colors, different shapes and sizes, resembles more of nature. Like when you go out into the forest, recently we went to Puerto Rico and you could see the jungle, and plants are just intertwined. You have, you could see selective species, but you also have all these other plants that are growing in between others, and so they kind of meld and create this nice looking aesthetic. And that's what I'm going to go for with this aquarium now that I have more of an idea of what I like about it. So I'm still keeping them somewhat separated as of right now, but when I go to replant, I'm kind of fading them into each other. So they're going to start blending, and they're going to start seeing multiple colors and those shapes and sizes and different heights and whatnot in the overall plants, so it's going to look more natural, even though it's going to be man-made. So after I did all the trimming of the plants, I then started to break them in half. Most of them were tall enough to break in half and create 2 new stems, and that's really because every stem section that I break off is another plant essentially, so it will fill in much quicker. Every time I break that one stem, I'm going to get 2 new stems out of it, and so on and so forth. So the more that I break those longer stems, the more plants I get, and the bushier it gets quicker. So I went through all the plants, I kind of divvied them up, and I started planting them back in. Now for the majority of them, I actually didn't even go down to the substrate. That's how thick some of the bushes of plants are in there. I just kind of pushed them down to the point where I felt like they weren't going to float back up, and they just kind of stayed put. There's really only been like 1 or 2 plants that haven't been staying down, so I just have to get back in there and plant them and get them to stay down. Now usually you want to keep in mind, when you plant plants so densely together, you're going to have lots of dieback at the bottom. So it's key to really maintain trimming them. That's the problem with fast growing plants in this situation, is I'm going to need to trim this more often now the denser it gets, because if I allow the bottoms not to get any light or less light, the bottoms may start losing their leaves, may start kind of looking straggly or leggy, and then I'm going to have to trim all the tops, replant the tops, and get rid of the bottoms, because they're all going to be leafless and it's not going to look good. So after I went through and replanted all the stems, there was one more trimming that I wanted to do. What I actually wanted to do with this is, as the stems are replanted, now there are kind of undisturbed tops. The tops of the very top of the plant that I took off is still intact, and what that's going to do is it's just going to grow more leggy and just a single stem. Well, I want this to start branching out now. So what I did is I went through and I trimmed off all the tops of all the plants that I had planted, so that way now every plant is branching from that same point, versus one plant that's going to go just straight up and not branch, and others that are going to be branching around it. I want all of them to branch, because now they're all going to start filling in the same area, and then next time I go to trim, they'll all be in the same situation, and I can just continuously hack them back and get bushier and bushier stems. Now I do want to mention that I did kind of plant a couple other plants in this aquarium since the original video aired. We have some Alternia Radaki Mini. I'm trying to go for a red carpet on one side of the tank. I want to see how that looks. It's already starting to fill in really nice, so I really like it. it'll probably be another 6 months or so before it actually really fills in that area and looks quite good. The other thing is I added in some Erios that Jake actually gave me. He didn't want them anymore. And I did some Bucephalangid variegated, which is a super rare type of boost where it's white and green. And you kind of, if you saw the original video, which if you haven't seen, I'll link up above, but it's, I just love variegated plants. The majority of the Anubis that are in here are variegated. They're just, I just love variegation. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button. And if you enjoyed it, leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think of the aquarium. Do you think I should do anything differently in a future video with this aquarium? Like, should I change anything? And if you're new here, make sure you hit the round button to subscribe. And if you want to check out our last video that we did on Ludwigias, you can click right there. And if you want to check out our video on Hygrophilias, which are a type of stem plant much like Ludwigias, you can click right there. And I'll see you guys next time.